entire Permian Basin is grieving. The state of Texas stands with you. The American people across this country stand with the men and women of Odessa, of Midland. We saw here horrific evil, a deranged murderer indiscriminately taking human life, but we also, in the face of evil, we saw bravery, we saw courage, we saw heroism, we saw law enforcement officers risking their life to protect their community. And I salute the men and women of law enforcement. I salute the Odessa police officers, the Midland police officers, the sheriffs, the federal law enforcement, everyone who was involved in stopping this horrific mass murder. You know, this is the 5th mass shooting we've seen in the state of Texas in the last 3 years. I've been on the ground, sadly, in all 5 of them. In Dallas, Sutherland Springs, Santa Fe, in El Paso, and now here in Odessa. I've been to too damn many of these. We need to come together, and we need to marshal law enforcement resources to stopping violent criminals before they carry out these kind of sick mass murders. We need to strengthen our background check system so that we know and prevent felons and fugitives and those with serious mental illness, dangerous mental illness, from acquiring guns before they get them. And we need to protect our citizens, and we can do all of that while protecting the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. That's what Texans understand is what is effective is focusing on the bad guys. I just had a very productive conversation with local law enforcement and also with county leaders, community leaders about, number one, the challenges that the Permian Basin is facing right now, the grieving, but also, number two, how the community is coming together, how the community, we're leaning on each other, we're loving each other, and we will come through stronger. Odessa will come through stronger. Midland will come through stronger as we are unified in keeping our community safe.
Senator, the governor was here a few days ago, said status quo is unacceptable. It seems like that's your sentiment. How? How do you change things now?
So I have consistently led the fight in the Senate to devote more resources to stopping felons and fugitives from getting firearms. In 2013, my first year in the Senate, I introduced legislation along with Chuck Grassley. It was the Grassley-Cruz legislation directed at protecting us and stopping these sort of mass murders. Grassley-Cruz came to the floor of the Senate. It was voted on. It got a majority of the Senate, 52 votes in favor of it, including 9 Democrats. It got the most bipartisan support of any of the comprehensive legislation we saw. But unfortunately, Harry Reid and the Democrats filibustered it. They demanded 60 votes, so it didn't pass. What Grassley-Cruz did is it strengthened the federal background check system. In particular, there are far too many convictions that are not included in that database. Take, for example, the Sutherland Springs shooting. Sutherland Springs, the worst church shooting in U.S. history. The shooter there had a felony conviction and a domestic violence conviction. It was already against federal law for that shooter to own or purchase a firearm. But unfortunately, the Obama administration never reported his felony conviction to the national database. So when he went in to buy the firearm that he used in that murder, they ran a background check and it came up clean. Grassley-Cruz would mandate, number one, a federal audit of the Department of Justice of every federal agency to make sure those convictions are in the database. Number two, would incentivize states and local governments to make sure those convictions are in the database. And number three, directs the Department of Justice to create a gun crime task force to prosecute felons and fugitives who try to illegally buy firearms. In the instance of Sutherland Springs, we know that individual lied on his background check form. That was a separate felony, and if Grassley-Cruz had passed, he would have been prosecuted, he would have been put in jail, and he would have been sitting in a federal prison cell instead of murdering those innocent people. Now, here with the shooter in Odessa, we're still learning the facts of what occurred, and there's an ongoing investigation, a federal investigation, local investigations. We'll discover more of the facts. It has been reported that the individual tried to buy a firearm and was denied a background check. My understanding is from the public reporting that's based on a mental health adjudication. We need to discover more what the facts are, what the circumstances are, and much of my discussion with law enforcement today concerned what were the warning signs that we had that this individual had a serious mental illness that posed a danger to himself or to others. What could we have done better to stop this deranged criminal from getting a gun in the first place? And that's going to be an ongoing discussion. But what is effective if we want to stop these kind of crimes is focus on violent criminals and those with serious and dangerous illness.
Did your bill address private sales? Because it's been widely reported that's how he obtained this weapon.
So Grassley Cruz, one of the things it does is it strengthens the criminal penalties for what are called straw purchases, which is somebody going through a private individual to get around a background check where they failed. And it put additional teeth in doing so. We don't know the facts right now. Law enforcement is still actively investigating, but it is at least possible that the facts will come out that this was a straw purchase. We will discover, I suspect, in the days and weeks going forward. I think it is important that we focus on strengthening the tools to keep firearms out of the hands of violent criminals and those with dangerous mental illness, and we focus on what's actually effective and what works. Far too often, we see those in the political arena exploiting these kind of horrific crimes for political benefit. And sadly, we're looking at some of the 2020 Democratic candidates who are proposing gun confiscation on a massive level nationwide. That's a mistake. That's not what West Texas wants. And that's not actually a policy that would keep us safer. What keeps us safer is focusing on the bad guys, the criminals, the felons, the fugitives, and those with dangerous mental illness. I have led the fight to do that in the Senate, and I'll continue leading the fight.
Are you going to propose other legislation or bring up Cruz Grassley again?
So Grassley Cruz, I reintroduced it in 2019. This year, I believe when we come back, the Senate will be back in session next week, we should take up and pass Grassley Cruz. That Senate Democrats need to stop trying to use this as a political cudgel and instead devote the resources to law enforcement, to stopping violent criminals from getting firearms. That's how we actually keep our community safer.
Do you have a message for the people of West Texas?
Odessa, Midland, all of West Texas is grieving, is hurting mightily. The people of Texas are with you. People of our country are with you. We are standing together, and as horrific as this crime was, know that Odessa, Midland, the entire Permian Basin will come through this stronger than we were before. We'll stand united. And let me say, I wish I had not seen so many of these mass murders. We have got to stop them, and we've got to stop them by going after the criminals and felons and stopping them before they commit these crimes. But every time we've seen a tragedy like this strike the state of Texas, we also see the community come together. We see love, we see sacrifice, we see courage, we see compassion. That unity is powerful. I'll tell you, the people of West Texas, you have never been lifted up by more prayer at any point than right now. And we're united, we'll come together, and let me make an additional point. Let me encourage those in the news media, let me encourage public officials not to say the name of this deranged killer. Far too often, these murderers seek notoriety. I think they should fade into obscurity and anonymity. We need to celebrate the heroes. We need to celebrate law enforcement. We need to celebrate the police officers who risked their life to stop this madman before more people's lives were taken. That's what will bring this community together. That's what we celebrate. And that's what brings all of Texas together, united as one.
Senator, you've talked about your opponents. What do you say to your opponents on the other side of the aisle, those in Texas and maybe some people who want to take a poke at Texas because this keeps happening in our state?
Look, we shouldn't be playing politics with tragedy and crimes of this sort. We need to solve the problem. We need to focus on policy solutions that will actually prevent crimes like this. That's what I've tried to do in the Senate, and we can do that while at the same time protecting the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. It doesn't prevent crimes to disarm law-abiding citizens. We've seen crime after crime where individual citizens have stepped forward, exercising their rights, and have kept the community safer. What prevents crimes like this is stopping the bad guys, stopping them from getting firearms, and if they violate the law, if they lie on a background check form, prosecuting them and putting them in jail before they endanger the rights and the lives of others.
I'm sorry, Senator, last question. You mentioned keeping the guns out of criminals and keeping the guns out of mentally deranged hands. Do you have any initial discussions on what that legislation might look like?
Yes, in 2013, I introduced legislation along with Senator Chuck Grassley. It was called the Grassley-Cruz legislation. It focused on strengthening the federal background check system, ensuring that felony convictions are in that system. Far too many federal and state felonies are not included in that system because they haven't been reported. We need to make sure that all the felonies are included in that system, and we need to prosecute felons and fugitives who lie on the background check system, put them in jail before they endanger the lives of others. In 2019, earlier this year, I reintroduced Grassley-Cruz. When the Senate comes back, we need to pass Grassley-Cruz so that we target violent criminals, and an important component of Grassley-Cruz also is protecting our schools and devoting more resources to hardening our schools, making our schools safer. Too many of these we've seen, these shootings have occurred in schools, in particular the Santa Fe school outside of Houston. We saw a deranged murderer targeting our kids. The best way to keep schools safe is more armed police officers on campus able to stop someone who threatens to commit violence against our kids. We need to focus on solutions that work. And I'll say West Texas is a community that understands that. Focus on what works. Don't try to exploit an event simply to violate the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. That's the response, and I hope we can come together united in preventing violent crime. I hope we can see some unity. This is a time with a lot of division, a lot of anger, and we ought to be able to come together and be united as one. I know West Texas can, and I'm hopeful the whole state of Texas and the entire country can come together and even when there is political discord, find unity and cooperation behind keeping our communities safe and protecting the constitutional rights of law-abiding Americans.
Are red flag laws included in that legislation?
You know, red flag laws are one of the solutions that has been discussed. I think those are appropriately considered at the state level, not the federal level. And so I think they're one of the tools that can be considered, but I think it's critically important that we protect due process, that there be mechanisms, that there be evidentiary standards, that there the ability to cross-examine witnesses and to contest the evidence. And we've seen different states that have used red flag laws as a potential tool. If you have someone who is mentally ill and dangerous and a threat to themselves or others, a red flag law can be one of the tools a state can consider, but I think it's critically important that we protect due process. And that's why I think it needs to be at the state level if it's going to go forward, rather than a federal one-size-fits-all solution for the country.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
If I'm a felon, it wouldn't bother me to commit another crime. So how do you prevent somebody from doing something illegal
Because
before they do it?
When a felon lies on a background check form, if you prosecute him, you put him in jail. So whether it bothers you or not, if you're in jail, you can't commit another crime.
Well, I could. But,
Well, you can't victimize innocent citizens. We have seen a long pattern of felons and fugitives who lie on their background check form who don't get prosecuted. We need to change that. We need to prosecute. Thank you, guys.
Senator Cruz. Thank you, Senator.